Now, one of the biggest contests this election season is going to be in the state of Texas. Texas is the state as well with the highest number of veterans in the country, the people who actually fight our wars. Texas is also the state with the most farms in the country, where farmers will now have to pay higher prices for fertilizer thanks to Trump's war. And though Texas is known as a state that produces a lot of oil and gas, it also consumes more petroleum and natural gas than any other state in the country, meaning that 60 cents is really going to hurt. Everything is bigger in Texas, including the cost of Trump's war. Texas is, of course, also the state where Democrats have just nominated a charismatic, faith-driven candidate who has already charmed some formerly Trump-friendly influencers like Joe Rogan. And he's already making sure that Texans understand what Trump's war will cost them.
Well, as a millennial, I saw how military disasters like the Iraq War robbed this nation of young lives, of billions of dollars, of our moral standing in the world. And I worry that our current leaders are repeating those same mistakes. I was in Sand Branch, Texas, which is a community south of Dallas that doesn't have running water. It doesn't have basic sewer infrastructure. So every dollar we spend bombing people in the Middle East is a dollar we're not spending in Sand Branch, Texas, or in our communities here at home. We're always told that we don't have enough money for schools or for health care or for our veterans, but there's always enough money to bomb people on the other side of the world.
That's the message Republicans will have to find a way to counter this November. But right now, Republicans can't even decide who their candidate in Texas is going to be. I mean, after the primary election, Texas Senator John Cornyn was forced into a runoff with his incredibly scandal-plagued, like the most scandal-plagued maybe in the country, primary challenger Ken Paxton. And for days, there were reports that Trump was going to endorse Cornyn to try and end the primary so Republicans could focus on beating James Tallarico. But then Ken Paxton threw a wrench into the plan, announcing that he would only drop out if Senate Republicans got rid of the filibuster to pass Trump's voter suppression bill. And the New York Times cites two sources who say Paxton texted the president directly to make sure he saw the ultimatum. So that's what the two Republicans fighting it out for the nomination are focused on while we're less than 2 weeks into a war in Iran. And now Trump is reportedly delaying his endorsement, trying to use his own party's infighting to push his unpopular agenda. Trump just cannot help but make things harder on his own party, especially in Texas. And now with an unpopular war casting a pall over this entire election, can Democrats convince Texas voters to finally make a change? Well, joining me now for his first cable news interview since becoming the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate in Texas is Texas State Representative James Tallarico. It's great to see you. And there's so much to ask you about. I just wanted to start. I mean, we have digested a lot of scary news today. A lot of people watching right now, a lot of people in Texas, of course, too. And this morning we learned of the shooting at Old Dominion University in which a suspected gunman killed an ROTC instructor. We just learned the details of the identity of that instructor. Then we learned about the attack on the synagogue, Temple Israel, just outside of Detroit. And I want to report and update people that the Department of Homeland Security has just identified the attacker as a Lebanese-born man who became a naturalized citizen in 2016. But the larger picture of all of this is these places of worship, schools. These are places that are supposed to be safe. And I was just wondering, and I was thinking about this as I was watching this news today about talking to you. You're a former teacher. You're a man of deep faith. You grew up in houses of worship. What was your reaction to all of this news we've been digesting today?
Well, authorities are still investigating these tragic events, but I think it's really important in moments like this for all of us to speak out against hate and violence in all its forms. I'm sending my love to our Jewish brothers and sisters in Michigan and around the country tonight. I think it's so important that each of us condemns anti-Semitism whenever it rears its ugly head. I know that things are scary right now. I know there's a lot of bad news whenever you open the newspaper or open your phone. And when I'm feeling tempted by hopelessness and by despair, there's a verse of scripture that I return to. It's in the Gospel of Luke when Jesus says something kind of strange. He says, "Blessed are you who weep." And it's strange because how can someone who's weeping also be considered blessed? Those feel like completely contradictory things. But I think what he's trying to tell us is that sometimes we see the world most clearly through our tears. And so if your heart is breaking as you watch what's happening to our communities, to our country, to our world, it means you still have a heart. And I want people to trust that. I want people to protect that, because that is what's going to get us out of all this. So blessed are those who weep tonight, and hopefully love will ultimately prevail over this kind of hate and violence in our world.
I know one of the other topics that's really of concern and worry to a lot of people watching right now is the war in Iran, which of course just started just a few days before the primary race in Texas. We're obviously going to talk about your race and your how you're going to win in November. But I wanted to ask about the Trump administration's newest talking point, that the war is short-term pain for long-term gain. I don't have to tell you how much this is impacting the state with more veterans than any other state in the country, a state with more farmers than any other state in the country. What do you make of that message and really the handling of the war itself so far?
I mean, I'd like them to tell that to the parents of the American troops who have lost their lives. That is not short-term pain. That is pain that will last forever. And for the President of the United States to recklessly send our men and women in uniform to the Middle East for another forever war is unconscionable. It's immoral, and it has to end. I know you said that we're going to talk about the race later, but this is why I'm running. This is why people in Texas are coming together, because we are sick of this kind of reckless foreign intervention that doesn't reflect our values as Texans or as Americans. We should be taking this money that's being wasted on bombs on the other side of the world, bring it back home here to invest in our communities, to fund our schools, to fund our healthcare, to lower prices. That's why the president was elected in 2024, to lower costs. He wasn't elected to start another forever war. No one asked for this. And I think people are sick and tired of this reckless foreign policy, and they're ready for a foreign policy that reflects our values.
I just had one more on the war, and it's really about the morality. And you and I have talked about morality as an issue that can guide leadership and guide, public office. One of the biggest flashpoints, as you know, in this war is this bombing of a girls' school in southern Iran, where over 170 people were killed, many of them children. And as I'm sure you've seen, our viewers know, a preliminary investigation by the Pentagon has found that it was the U.S.'s fault. You're running to be, of course, a U.S. senator. You also think deeply about the human impact of policies. What was your reaction to that? And also just how it's been handled since then?
As a former educator, as someone who has fought for students and for kids in the halls of the Texas Capitol, it makes me sick to my stomach to see our foreign policy take the lives of innocent children in Iran and in the Middle East. And it has to end. We, again, need a foreign policy that reflects our values. We can support the democracy movement in Iran. We can prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon without bombing innocent school children, without sending our American troops off to die in another forever war. These are not mutually exclusive goals. And I think the country is ready for a sane foreign policy again.
Both of the Republicans, and boy, is that a wild freaking primary happening over there, who are competing, have expressed their support for this war. What do you think about that? And how much, as you're out there, you're campaigning a lot. You're talking to farmers who are impacted by the price of fertilizer. You're going to VFW halls. I'm sure you're talking to young people who are worried about a draft. What do you think about their support, and how is it really coming into conversations you're having across the state of Texas right now?
Well, there is bipartisan opposition to this new forever war. It's Democrats, it's independents, it's Republicans, it's a lot of young people across the political spectrum who don't want to be sending money to bombs that are killing people in Iran. They want that money spent right here in our communities where it's needed most. They want us to be funding our schools. They want us to be providing that affordable health care to everyone. They want us to bring down the costs of housing, of groceries, of prescription drugs. That's what people want to see from our government. They don't want to see this kind of reckless foreign intervention. They don't want to see wars for oil. They want us to serve their interests, to serve their needs. And that's not a partisan statement. That is folks across the spectrum in Texas who want that kind of servant leadership again in our government.